On April 11, 2024, a Vietnamese court handed down a death sentence to Truong My Lan. Her crime? Stealing $27 billion from a bank she secretly controlled. That's not a typo. 27 billion, an amount equal to 6% of Vietnam's entire GDP. This wasn't just the largest fraud in the history of Southeast Asia. It might be the largest bank fraud in the history of the world. The damage was so severe, Vietnam's central bank had to inject $24 billion of its own money just to stop the national economy from collapsing. Then, just over a year later, everything changed. Vietnam abolished the death penalty for financial crimes, and Truong My Lan walked away with life in prison instead. So how does a woman go from a market stall to pulling off a heist of this magnitude? It starts in 1956 in Saigon. For nearly 20 years, a young Truong My Lan sold cosmetics and hair accessories with her mother. It was a small-time life in a country devastated by war and crippled by 400% inflation. But in 1986, Vietnam opened its economy. Foreign companies like Samsung and LG rushed in, and Lan, now in her mid-30s, saw her chance. She founded a trading company and quickly proved her real talent wasn't in business strategy, but in relationships. In Vietnam's gray market economy, knowing the right people was everything, and Lan knew everyone. She used her government connections to acquire development rights for landmark projects across Ho Chi Minh City, becoming known as the real estate queen of Vietnam. By the 2010s, she controlled over 1,000 properties. But real estate wasn't enough. She wanted a bank. Here's how the heist worked. Lan couldn't legally own a majority of a bank, so she did it illegally. Using hundreds of proxies, friends, family, employees, she secretly acquired over 90% of the Saigon Joint Stock Commercial Bank, or SCB. With total control, she turned the bank into her personal piggy bank. She set up thousands of shell companies that existed only on paper. Then, from 2012 to 2022, she ordered SCB to approve 2,500 fraudulent loans to these ghost companies. The money flowed directly to her. To keep regulators away, she bribed them. One central bank official was paid over $5 million to look the other way as the bank was hollowed out from the inside. When the scheme finally imploded, the court's message was clear. This level of corruption threatened the nation's stability and demanded the ultimate punishment. The death sentence was a signal. But it wasn't the end of her story. In June 2025, Vietnam's National Assembly made a landmark decision. It abolished capital punishment for 8 crimes, including embezzlement and bribery. The reform was driven by a desire to align with international human rights standards and improve foreign legal cooperation. Overnight, Truong My Lan's death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment. So the woman who orchestrated one of history's greatest thefts escaped execution, not through an appeal or a pardon, but because the law itself changed beneath her feet. She remains in prison while a nation continues the slow, painstaking process of recovering the billions she stole and rebuilding the trust she so catastrophically shattered.
In 2011, 3 small Vietnamese banks were on the brink of collapse. They were bleeding cash. A property tycoon named Truong My Lan stepped in with a proposal for Vietnam's central bank. Let them merge. Let her create one new stable bank, the Saigon Commercial Bank, or SCB. The government agreed. There was just one problem. Vietnamese law is crystal clear. No single person can own more than 5% of any bank. Lan needed to control the bank, not just own a tiny piece of it. So she got creative. She gathered a network of over 1,000 shell companies. On paper, they looked real, trading in real estate and finance. In reality, they were hollow entities that did nothing but answer to her. Next, she needed collateral to get loans, so she took cheap plots of land owned by her other companies, had them appraised at astronomically high values, and offered them up as security.
Sometimes the same piece of worthless land was used as collateral for multiple different loans. Then came the main event. Her 1,000 ghost companies would apply for loans from SCB,
the bank she secretly owned. With the fake collateral in place, the applications were approved instantly. Between 2012 and 2022, these fraudulent loans made up 93% of all the money SCB ever lent out. The grand total was more than $43 billion. Once the money was out, it was time to make it disappear. The cash would be wired frantically between her shell companies, a dizzying digital shell game until the trail went cold. Some of it went overseas, some went right into her personal accounts. By 2018, she stopped even pretending to make loan repayments. She was just taking the money. Prosecutors say she embezzled at least $12.5 billion for herself. But the total damage to the bank, the money that is simply gone, is $27 billion. That's 6% of Vietnam's entire GDP for a year. At one point, she sent her personal driver to SCB's headquarters to withdraw $4 billion in cash. They packed it into boxes, took it to her home, and stacked it in her basement. $4 billion in Vietnamese dong would fill a large room from the floor to the ceiling. You have to be wondering, how did no one notice? Oh, people noticed. They were just paid very well to look the other way.
The head of Vietnam's entire banking supervisory bureau took a $5.2 million bribe from Lan. It was delivered to his house in styrofoam boxes filled with cash. It remains the largest single bribe in the country's history. He's now in prison for life. But bribes were only part of her cover. Lan cultivated a public image as a beloved philanthropist. During the COVID pandemic, she made an $80 million donation to the government's relief efforts. She funded schools. She was seen as a pillar of the community, which made her seem untouchable. Her real shield, though, was political. A man named Lê Tong Hai, a former top official in Ho Chi Minh City and a member of Vietnam's powerful Politburo, was her protector. With his political umbrella, no one dared to investigate her. Land deals, government contracts, and bank approvals all sailed through without a single question. To keep the whole scheme afloat, SCB had to attract a constant flow of new money. So it offered deposit rates much higher than any other bank, and people poured in, chasing the good returns. By 2022, their money had turned SCB into the largest private bank in Vietnam. At the same time, Lan was also selling fraudulent corporate bonds, cheating another 42,000 investors out of $1.2 billion. The whole operation was audacious, crude, and happening in plain sight. For a decade, it seemed like the perfect crime. And it worked, until the day it didn't.
In October 2022, when police raided the company of Vietnamese real estate tycoon Truong My Lan, they found 6 tons of evidence. Fake loan documents, forged collateral, bribery records, everything needed to unravel the largest financial fraud in the country's history. The news hit the market like a bomb. Vietnam's stock market crashed. Her bank, SCB, was slammed with a massive bank run as terrified customers rushed to withdraw their money. The panic was so severe that Vietnam's central bank had to step in with a staggering $24 billion emergency loan just to keep SCB from collapsing entirely. To put that in perspective, that single loan represented 1/3 of Vietnam's entire foreign exchange reserves at the time. It was a bailout of unprecedented scale, all to contain the damage from one woman's empire of fraud. After 18 months of intense investigation, the trial began in March 2024. It was broadcast live across Vietnam, a national spectacle of justice. 86 defendants stood accused alongside Lan, 60 of whom were former central bank officials, the very people tasked with preventing such a crisis, who had taken bribes or helped cover it up. On April 11th, the court found Lan guilty. Embezzlement, bribery, fraud, the list was long. The sentence was short: death. Her husband received 9 years, her niece 17. The court, however, offered a single grim condition. If Lan could repay 3/4 of the stolen amount, about $9 billion, her death sentence would be commuted to life in prison. Her lawyers claimed she had enough assets, but they were almost all real estate. And here was the problem. Everyone in the world now knew she was desperately selling property to save her own life.
Imagine trying to negotiate a sale when the buyers know you're doing it to avoid execution. They would lowball her to hell. In December 2024, Lan appealed her death sentence. The court upheld it. For a moment, it seemed inevitable. Vietnam was actually going to execute a billionaire for financial crimes. Then, everything changed. On June 25, 2025, Vietnam's National Assembly held a vote. They moved to abolish the death penalty for 8 specific crimes, including embezzlement and bribery. The vote was nearly unanimous, 429 lawmakers in favor, only 10 against. Effective July 1, 2025, anyone previously sentenced to death for these crimes would have their sentence automatically converted to life in prison.
Truong My Lan was the highest profile beneficiary of this sudden legal shift. Her lawyer called her that morning with the news. His report on her reaction was simple. She is very happy. So, after orchestrating the largest bank fraud in Southeast Asian history, stealing $27 billion, causing a nationwide banking crisis, and receiving a death sentence, Truong My Lan will now serve life in prison instead. And the story doesn't end there. She won a separate appeal that reduced another life sentence for money laundering down to 30 years. Combined with other charges, she now faces a total of 30 years. If she cooperates and pays back enough money, that sentence could shrink even further. So why the sudden change of heart from the Vietnamese government? Officially, they cited a careful analysis of the nature and severity of offenses. Unofficially, the reason is far more pragmatic. Vietnam is trying to attract foreign investment and join the developed world. Executing billionaires for white-collar crimes doesn't project the stable, modern image they're trying to build. The UN welcomed the move, but it's a selective change. 10 crimes, including murder, treason, and drug trafficking, still carry capital punishment in Vietnam. A major reform born from the ashes of a major scandal.
The case of Truong My Lan isn't about one corrupt billionaire. Her fall from grace rips the curtain back on a nation's high-stakes gamble. For the last decade, Vietnam has been running an aggressive anti-corruption campaign called the Blazing Furnace. It is the largest, longest, and most intense cleanup in the country's modern history, and Lan is its most spectacular casualty. So why the sudden ferocity? Opportunity. When the US-China trade war heated up, global companies desperately needed a backup plan, a China plus one strategy, to diversify their supply chains. Vietnam saw its chance to become that one. Giants like Apple, Samsung, and Foxconn all started shifting production. But there was a huge roadblock. Corruption was so baked into the system that foreign investors were getting cold feet. A staggering 65% of Vietnamese citizens reported paying a bribe in the last year, second only to India. To seize the moment, the government had to clean house, fast, and the Blazing Furnace went into overdrive. The campaign has been so intense, it's taken down 2 presidents, 3 deputy prime ministers, and forced the resignation of at least 7 members of the powerful 18-person Politburo. This is the volatile world where Lan operated. For years, she was shielded by powerful political allies. But by 2022, her main protector was gone, disciplined for corruption himself. Without his political umbrella, she was exposed. At that exact moment, the global economy turned against her. The US Federal Reserve started hiking interest rates, capital fled emerging markets, and Ho Chi Minh City's property market crashed by 25%. Lan's entire empire was a house of cards, built on ever-rising property values. When they fell, the gaping holes in her finances became impossible to hide. The anti-corruption campaign caught her at her moment of maximum weakness, and she collapsed. Her trial became a national spectacle, broadcast everywhere as proof that Vietnam was serious about reform. And it worked. Foreign direct investment soared. For stealing $27 billion, she was sentenced to death. End of story, right? Not quite. This is where the story takes a hard turn.
Shortly after her sentencing, Vietnam announced it was abolishing the death penalty for financial crimes. This wasn't about mercy, it was about money. Executing a billionaire, even a corrupt one, looks brutal on the international stage, especially when you're trying to attract foreign capital. And here is the ultimate irony. The trial was a show designed to prove to foreign investors that Vietnam was cleaning up its act, but the death sentence was too harsh for those same investors. So they walked it back. Now, she'll likely spend 20 to 30 years in prison. Vietnam gets to recover billions in assets and send a carefully calibrated message. We're tough on corruption, but not so tough that will scare away your money. Whether this delicate balancing act will be enough to turn Vietnam into the next great Asian tiger economy, that's the real question. What do you think? Death penalty or life in prison for stealing $27 billion? Drop a comment. If you learned something, smash that like button and subscribe to What If Money for more wild financial crime stories. See you next time.